morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you. It is cold and rainy where I am. Hopefully not where you are.
Icy here.
I'm in New Haven, Connecticut. All right. Welcome, everyone. And this morning we are joined for our lightning half-hour Daf Yomi week in the review. I'm Rachel Scheinerman. This is My Jewish Learning, and we are joined by Rabbi Asher Lopatin. Okay.
Hey,
Lopatin, take it away.
Thank you, Rachel. Look, I'm going to make this. There's a lot of exciting stuff here. You got to get through a lot of the sacrifices and old commitments. And I know there's a lot of talk about throwing coins in the Dead Sea, Yam HaMelach. I hope they preserve the Dead Sea. It's a big issue, all the other issues going on in Israel. So we don't have to worry so much about water issues because of desalinization, but we have to worry about the Dead Sea. So hopefully in 100 years, when they do Daf Yomi, I hope there is a Dead Sea that they could talk about throwing coins there. But in any case, I want to start with on Kaf Daled Amud Aleph. This was from last Thursday, and 24a. And I actually want to start off with something that Rav Hershel Schachter, one of the great Rosh Hashivas at Yeshiva University. I heard that he would quiz people. He was in charge of the Kolel Elyon, the upper learning group of YU, and he would test people. And one of his tests was, was a woman allowed to be a Nazir? And a lot of people guessed that wrong and said no. And of course, the Torah says that it's Isha Isha, a man or a woman. So Rav Hershel Schachter is not known as the biggest feminist in the world, and I think he would agree with that depiction. But it is very it's interesting. Nazir it's in Nashim. Well, it's in Nashim, yeah, it's in Nashim, and it is men or women, and I think behind the scenes, just as in Nedarim, there's some fascinating issues going on between relationships of men and women, and even in the first Mishnah on Kaf Daled, there's the woman makes the neder. The man, Hefer la Bala, the husband, right, has this power over his wife to disavow vows that we know from the Dharma and from Nazir. But then the question is the ownership of the animal that there was committed, and is that animal owned by the woman, or im shalo haita and im shala haita? So they're property rights. So even though you see, so there's a, let's say, equality when it comes to Nazir. Nazir is sort of an equality issue that places women equal with men in spirituality, let's say. There's a lot you could talk about that, but maybe, this is a spiritual practice. And so it places men and women on equal footing. But then there's some disequilibrium. But then as far as property ownership, a woman going into a marriage still owns her property. And that's dealt with elsewhere. But I thought that was sort of an interesting backdrop on this question that Rav Hershel Schachter would ask, to make sure that people understood that it's really a complicated, and what I would say maybe Judaism, as an Orthodox rabbi, I would say, is an evolving understanding of relationships between the genders, and now even more now in the really 21st century of people that are not gendered. So really interesting stuff in this Mishnah, and interesting machloket, and the beginning opening Gemara on Kaf Daled Amud Aleph, which says, Montana debal lo mishtabedla. I love this way of phrasing it. Who is the Tana? Who is the source, the Mishnaic source or the Tanaitic source that the husband is not mishta'abed. Mishta'abed is sort of, I want to say, enslaved, subsumed, like eved. It comes from the root eved, a servant, a serve. So just because the husband, the beginning of this Mishnah said that if the animal belongs to the husband, it doesn't really work, and the animal will go free. But this phraseology, and okay, I'm a rabbi, so I give a little sermon on it, whatever, hermeneutical or whatever. But to a certain extent, the husband is mishu'abad, has to take into account, is a servant of his wife and of his wife's words, at least, and at least the animals are. So there you go. There's interesting dynamic that goes on there. So we're going to skip to Kaf Hey Amud Aleph 25a, and love this interesting discussion, which comes up, or phrase comes up more and more. We talk. It's a very technical, esoteric thing about that. Some of the chatat offering, the sin offering, could be mixed into an offering for another kind of sacrifice, and the dava, a voluntary offering. Sacrifices, maybe I should say for a second, I love saying the korbanot section. There's a section in the Siddur before you start davening that deals with a lot of sacrifices. And Art Green, Rabbi, Professor, Dr. Art Green, is coming out with a new Siddur. And in that Siddur, he addresses the korbanot. He talks about the korbanot, that there's significance to them. So the sacrifices, sometimes we want to dismiss them, but there is something about that it's empowering, it's empowering that we can give something to God. It's something, sounds a little bit pagan, theurgy, that kind of thing, to change God. But there is something empowering, that it's not only begging Hashem, help us, Hashem, give us strength, Hashem, help us. There's something empowering about sacrifices. So mixed within sacrifice, I think, are a template for other kinds of things, for empowering human beings to change the world, for enjoying Shabbat. When we talk about the sacrifice for Shabbat, it's just a template for saying, let's make the most of Shabbat. And likewise, here, this very esoteric discussion of sacrifices is that in regarding Nazir sacrifices, the sin offering is not mixed up with the other offering. Don't worry about that. Worry about this really interesting thing. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is on 25a, says, halacha hi benazir. Oh, don't worry. It's a special law regarding Nazir because at Reish Lakish says, because the Torah says, for all their nidarim and their nidvot and their voluntary offerings. The Torah says that, that it's fine, that it's mutter, that the sin offering is not mixing them. But the key thing here is, what I want to say is that we're, on the one hand, we're on 25a, we're saying the Torah says it. Now, we don't always follow what the Torah, putting quotes up here if you're not watching, what the Torah says, because we sometimes our rabbis interpret for what the Torah says. In last week's Parsha, ayin tachat ayin, eye for an eye, came up so much. So just because the rabbis say the Torah didn't mean taking out an eye. If you knock out someone's eye or you punch out someone's tooth, they punch out your tooth. The rabbis say, no, it's monetary compensation. So likewise here, just because the Torah says it, what means the Torah says it? We interpret sometimes what the Torah says. So Kaf Hey Amud Bet on 25b is even stronger, and this comes up a couple of times. It says Lama Likra. Well, it doesn't have a name here who says this, but what do I need a pasuk for talking about a Vlad, Chatat, Utmur, very complicated stuff. The child, the offspring of a sin offering, and the switched guilt offering, asham, don't worry about that, but Talmud Lomar rock. So they learn it from rock kodashecha, only your holy things, from the word rock in the Torah. But bing, again, from the Torah, what do you mean? Lama likra hilchata gmirila. So we say, what do we need a pasuk to teach us this? We have something better. We have hilchata gmirila. We have a tradition that teaches us this, that anyway, the child of a chatat, of a sin offering, has to be put to death. Not so pleasant, but the key thing is that there's this dynamic, or maybe dialectic, between the Torah and what the Torah says and what we learn from tradition. And this is going to be repeat throughout this whole over Kaf Hey Amud Bet 25b, this whole thing of really why do we need a verse from the Torah? We have a tradition, we have a Masoret, we have something that's been passed down from, I would say, the oral tradition. So you have a little bit of a tension between the oral tradition and the written tradition. And, that is throughout the Talmud. And that's sort of, it's not rejecting the Torah, but it's recognizing that the Torah is open to interpretation. So it's sometimes much more powerful, certainly, to learn a halacha, a law from a tradition, rather than just a pasuk in the a pasuk in the Torah. So Kafav talks about sort of mixing up your different commitments of money, whether it's voluntary, obligatory, or that. But what I want to get to is the bottom of 26b. Bottom of 26b, when it talks about different kinds of commitments that you're making, and suddenly it says there's a difference between money, making a commitment of money for getting the Nazir, you're committing that much for a Nazirut, making yourself a Nazir, and it talks about animals, and then it talks about ma'ot velo ofot. So, money, but it doesn't work for birds. What kind of birds is commitment to? I am not going to answer that, because there is a giant Tosfot. I don't know, please, if someone did the whole Tosfot. Tosfot are, on the Talmud, which is like, whatever, 5th century, 6th century. You have medieval commentaries, and actually we'll get to one, Maimonides, who is not on the actual page, but it can be used as a commentary. But the classic commentary is Rashi from the 11th century of the Common Era, and he's always on the inside of the page. But on the outside of the page, and unfortunately, some Nidarim didn't really have Rashi. It had the Ron, it had pseudo Rashi. But on the left side, on the outer side, you have the Tosafists, who were Rashi's children, grandchildren, in-laws, Rabbeinu Tam, the Ri, all these famous people, the Rashbam, and they lived, they're Ashkenazim, we worried it's the world is too Ashkenazi focused, so there's a lot of emphasis on the Sephardim and the Eastern and Mizrahi and the Levant, but we still dominate. And by the way, most of the Rishonim, the medieval authorities that are in the back of the Gemara and Maimonides and all that, they're not Ashkenazim, but on the Daf, the Ashkenazim dominate. So these Tosafists are from various parts of, there are Tosafot Anglia, there were Tosafists that live in England, there are those in France, many lived in France and Germany, all over that area. So Tosafot, and a lot of times they will comment on Tosafot. So there's a Tosafot about that's pretty big. And then on Kav Zayin Amud Aleph, there is a giant Tosfot, all talking about Taruvo, mixing things up. And I didn't do this Tosfot, but I just noticed that it's giant and on 27a. And therefore, there's just a little bit sort of Gemara. And again, a lot of what we're talking about is mixing up different sacrifices. Hevi shalosh behemo velo perush haroy l'chatat. So you brought 3 animals, but you didn't specify which one you wanted as a sin offering. So mainly what I wanted to say is that sometimes it's so fascinating that sometimes the most esoteric thing that we kind of say, like, honestly, I don't care if it's a chatat, if it's a sin offering. I don't care if it's not a sin offering. If you got to do this or that, Tosfot cares. The medieval authorities care, and it's something really it's something I think very profound in this, that we don't dismiss things that might seem, that we aren't meaningful to us, but they're still part of our tradition. But I would honestly say that it's a struggle that I like in services, Shabbat services. Oh my gosh, they were sometimes on high holidays. We used to do my shul in Chicago, a 5-hour service from 8 to 1, 5 hours. There were so many things that we said that were part of the tradition that were probably not so meaningful for a lot of people. And I know that certainly the Reform tradition struggled with this and tried to keep things meaningful, and really felt that the cult, all these sacrifices, all these rituals weren't meaningful. So there is value in trying to make Judaism meaningful for people, but there also is, we can't dismiss any part of Judaism. And that's what Tosfot do. They are serious about this. This is part of our tradition, so they're really serious about it. So, I guess there's the, I don't know what we do. So maybe a balance. Maybe most of what we should do should be things that speak to us and are meaningful for us and we can be passionate about. But always check ourselves that maybe we're doing something, whether it's ritual, whether it's learning, whether it's that's not so meaningful for us, but just to make sure we're not just indulging in things that we like and giving up the tradition. So anyway, that's for further thought. And then, we get to 27b, which refers to actually a later Mishnah, but I love it because Ha'ish megalech al nizirut aviv, the man can shave his hair, but using the commitment that his father made to the animal. So you need to bring an animal, but the father did it, and I will, meaning that Hareini Nazir al menat shagalech al me'ot abba. I am a Nazir. I'm making my commitment to being a Nazir, but I'm going to use as the collateral, as the sacrifice, the money for the sacrifice for my father's money. And it's talking about his father had died already. So, the halachic issue is not so meaningful for me. I'm not so interested, but I'm really interested in that we're developing within Nazirut, which to some extent, remember, is like distancing us from relationships. You're not drinking and partying with people. You're not going to Shiva, or when you can go to Shivas, but you're not going to funerals. You're not doing some of those things. Maybe your hair is disgusting, and so no people don't want to hang out with you. But on the other hand, we are retaining relationships, husband and wife, father and son, and we'll get to really one that I want to make sure we address in a couple of dapim, a father and his child. But here it's the child, the adult child is making a commitment using his father's money. So doesn't seem to work so well, and contradicting what we said a daf or two ago, not contradicting but supplementing, I guess. The Torah, we get it right from the Torah. The Torah says, Yavi korbano, he has to bring his sacrifice. Bekorbano, hu yotzei, ve'eno yotzei bekorban aviv. You can fulfill your obligation with your own korban sacrifice, not with the money or the sacrifice of your dad. So, nice idea that it has to be yours, that really you have to make this sacrifice, and you have to make this commitment, and not your daddy's money can't bail you out. So can help with a lot of other things, but can't bail. But of course, then we get to Mishnah that I really like. We love all of Torah, but that speaks to me, I'll say. On 28b, Ha'ish Madir et Bno ben Nazir. So a man can make his young child, not bar mitzvah yet. We have a bar mitzvah in shul this Shabbat. Maybe I'll mention that, now your dad cannot make you a Nazir. But, and maybe that's sort of part of Baruch Sheptarani Me'an Shoshel Hazeh. It's not clear. Anyway, there's a certain blessing that is said at a bar mitzvah. It's not clear whether the parent should say it or the kid should say it, but there is a certain break in responsibility. But before the child is a bar mitzvah, then the parent, the father, can make him a nazir. Now here, here, at least it's not so equal. The mom can't do this. And again, this is like a struggle forever to figure out gender roles and equality and how it all works in our tradition. But at least the Gemara asked the question. Why can't the mother do it? Okay, so at least we're getting there. Now I want to read a little bit. If you notice, there are little letters in the Gemara. If you're using a regular, Vilna Shas, a regular Gemara, I say regular, but a Vilna Shas, you have these little letters that refer you to the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah, a side thing that gives you the footnotes of the Rambam and the Code of Laws, but Maimonides' Yad HaChazaka. And sometimes it's really, Maimonides wrote his monumental work of halacha, of Jewish law, in Hebrew. Other works he wrote in Judeo-Arabic, but this he wrote in Hebrew, beautiful language. And it's, he talks about that, he talks about a father, the father can, Ha'ish Madira B'no Katam B'Nazir, the father can make the child a Nazir, even if he is not old enough to make a neder on his own, to make an oath on his own. He says this is only a Nazir, not other kind of oaths or commitments. But what I love about this is that, again, we love everything. What speaks to me, Lo Ratzah Haben, this is the little kid. The little kid did not want this. Umicha Badavar Zen says, no, Daddy, I don't want to do this. Oshigilach Seharo. And you might have some kids that cut their own hair. They took a knife and cut their own hair. Or the relatives didn't like this. And the relatives said, what are you doing, Daddy, making your child a Nazir? So then, Hare Ze Eino Nazir. So he's not a Nazir. So the Rambam said, then he doesn't, so it's got to be, the kid is into this. It's sort of very strange. What is going on? Why is he doing this? Reish Lakish on 29a says, Kidei lachancho b'mitzvot, that the idea is to get the kid to teach the kid chinuch, education in mitzvot. And it really raises quite an interesting question that, how far do we go in educating our kids and, enforcing our kids, we could, scoff at this dad who makes his kid a Nazir. But, what about, sending kids to day schools, and let's say they don't want to, or I was talking to my wife, to Rachel, about this. What about dragging kids to shul? We're a rabbinic family, so our kids are preachers' kids. But, Rachel said that was a non-negotiable. Every Shabbat, you go to shul. It's more fun to be in your pajamas or whatever, but you go to shul, you wake up. But, is that too much? And I'm a big libertarian. So on one hand, I kind of like the idea of, whatever, just want the kids to be happy. But, there is a balance between teaching the kids, and I think on one extreme is making your kid a Nazir. And the other extreme is, whatever you want, run around like, Vildachaya. run around like a free person, whatever you want. So, I'm not here. We're not here to delve into that too much, but I think that it's fascinating that comes up. Now, it's interesting also because that if you just do this, chinuch, l'shem chinuch, is only rabbinic. It's not like for the sake of education. When kids are doing things, the obligation for kids to do things is only rabbinic. There is an exception for Shabbat. It might be, even though, sometimes you see people having the kid push the button or have the kid, turn the light on, or the kid, whatever, carry the thing outside the Eruv on Shabbat, do different things that the adult wouldn't want to do on Shabbat. But I know Briskers were very strict about not having the kids do things. And it might be first of all, it might be a deoraita, Torah prohibition, because in Shabbat it says, you and your child, and it talks about your young child. So I don't address all the questions, but Benjamin, you say, should a kid be drinking wine? But remember that Nazir is not just wine, it's grape juice also, or any grape product. So kids love every Friday night in shul, kids drink grape juice. So that's a problem. But yes, it is a good question, actually. Do you let your kid, drink wine or have a good time, screen time? All these questions are addressed in this Masechet.
It's not clear to me the rabbis thought children shouldn't drink wine. That's certainly a contemporary, but that's not clear to me from anything I've read. But I haven't read everything, that's for sure.
Absolutely, I think,
and it was very diluted. They mixed it with a lot of water. Yeah,
so it's an anachronism to say grape juice and serving grape juice, but they
might have served that too. I don't know.
Right. But you could only. There's a question of how young is your child? When do you have to stop forcing? Or when can you not make your kid a Nazir? And it's a machloket, when the kid is old enough to make their own nidarim, their own oaths, or it's until the kid is bar mitzvah, or shtei sarot, 2 hairs, which is sort of that age of maturity. So it's not clear. And again, that's another question of when do you decide that your kid can make their own decisions? Like, when do you stop forcing the kid to go to shul? Or when do you start, all these kind of things, when they're 18, when they're 13, when they're 15. Rav Aaron Soloveitchik used to say that he never hit his kids, but he said that the rabbis felt that it was not effective when they reach a certain age, and therefore you absolutely shouldn't. So a lot of things fall into this category of education and the idea of when does it start and when does it end, and how do you do it? But I love, as the Rambam said, if the kid is pushing back against becoming a little baby Nazir, then don't do it. It doesn't work. It's got to be with the kid's approval. The last thing on the bottom, and we're getting to today's daf, the bottom of 30b, hekdesh ta'ut, you make a mistake in, you intended to make this thing holy, and then this thing became holy, but walked out of the house. But on 31a, which is going to be today's daf, a different bull came out of the house than you thought. You thought the white would and the black did. This reminds me of the sad story of Jephthah, the great leader who won a great battle, but said the first thing that comes out of my house will be dedicated to God. And he thought it would be some kind of animal. And instead it was his daughter. And it's not clear that he actually, God forbid, sacrificed his daughter, but it's sort of a sad postscript to a great story. But here we see that it doesn't, it's a whole question. Eino hekdesh. So should have learned a little bit more Gemara and he would have gotten out of it. I think it's 10 o'clock, Rachel.
It is 10 o'clock on the East Coast anyway, not necessarily for everybody on this call at all, which usually stretches from California to Europe. But thank you, Rabbi Low-Patton, because I have a microphone. I always get to, please pardon my dog. Simcha. I usually get to insert a comment here or so. And one thing your discussion, which touched on many rich things in this week's daf, reminded me of is, as with Yivamot, it's always interesting that the biblical examples don't necessarily align with the laws, right? So we saw with Yivamot, with levirate marriage, the story of, for instance, Judah and Tamar, or Ruth and Boaz. The whole way that levirate marriage works doesn't really align with the biblical laws. And here in Nazirut, with Naziriteship, as I was thinking about what you were saying, the two examples I can think of in the Bible, Samson and Samuel, both don't really align with a lot of what we have been learning about Nazirut. For instance, we've been learning that women can be a Nazir. So why didn't these infertile women just declare themselves each a Nazir in order to try and beseech God for a child? Why did they promise it would be the child? And then also, as you were discussing the Gemara today, the Gemara is concerned about a parent forcing Nazirut on a child before they can consent to it. So I think it's very interesting. I think sometimes when the biblical examples don't align with the laws as we have them and as we interpret them.
Right.
I'll leave you all with.
They're close, but not the right thing. Yeah.
They're close, but and the Gemara often does this too. We've seen it time and time again, where the rabbis will present a law and then they will tell a story that points up the problems with the law and makes you question the whole thing. So it's definitely textured and interesting and far from flat. So we're not going to solve that one today. I'm going to let you all go. Thank you, Rabbi Lopatin, for steering us around so much material so quickly. Thank you, all of you, for being here and learning with us and teaching us too. Really nice discussion in the comments. And I'm glad we got to answer some of them. And I'm sorry for the ones we didn't. And we will see you in this space in a week from now and in your inbox tomorrow morning. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Sorry for not answering every question. I'm sorry. Just plowed on, but
there are always more questions. Laura, please bring it back next week and we'll see if we can get to it then.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Be well. Have a good Shabbos. Stay
Shabbat
safe.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.